The music thumped low in the dimly lit bar as the Marine leaned in, slurring his words. "What's your name, sweetheart? Bet it ain't on that little tag." The woman behind the bar just smiled. She looked too calm, too quiet. But when his hand reached across the counter, he had no idea who he was touching. Maya wiped down the counter with the same calm, rhythmic motion she'd been doing for the last 20 minutes. Her bar shift had started like any other. Regulars from the base, off-duty officers laughing too loud, and that persistent smell of cheap beer and fried wings soaking the wood. But tonight felt off. The moment Sergeant Nick Pearson walked in, dragging a cloud of arrogance with him, Maya clocked him. She could tell by his swagger, shoulders rolled too far back, jaw clenched like he was chewing anger for sport. He wasn't alone. 3 other Marines flanked him, equally loud, equally drunk. Maya kept her cool. She always did. Behind the bar, her hair tied back, wearing a plain black tee and faded jeans, no one suspected anything. And that's how she liked it. "Bartender," Pearson bellowed, tapping his glass like she was deaf. "You look like you could use some fun. Ever had a real man buy you a drink?" Maya's lips twitched, just enough of a smile to stay under the radar. "I serve drinks. I don't drink on shift." He leaned in, invading her space. "Oh, come on. You look like you've been working hard. You ever get out from behind that bar?" From across the room, one of the older regulars shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the first time a Marine acted out, but Maya gave a small shake of her head, a silent signal to let her handle it. Pearson tapped her name tag. Lisa. A fake name she used just for work. "Lisa, huh? Cute. I like that. Lisa, tell me this. What does a pretty thing like you do when the bar's closed? You got a boyfriend, someone to protect you?" His tone changed, tightening. "Or are you all alone out here?" He didn't notice her knuckles tense. She didn't answer. Instead, she poured another drink, for someone else, and kept moving. But Pearson wasn't done. His pride was stung. He followed her to the other end of the bar and said loud enough for half the place to hear, "You know what your problem is? You don't respect authority. That's dangerous. Real dangerous for someone like you." Maya froze. Not out of fear, but calculation. She measured every possible outcome in a second. One wrong move, and it would escalate. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that she'd been trained for moments exactly like this. Her eyes met his, and for a flicker of a second, something cold passed between them. Pearson smirked and took a sip from his glass, still thinking he had the upper hand. But he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Pearson's friends had started laughing now. Not because of anything funny, but because that's what drunk men in uniform do when they think the world owes them obedience. Maya didn't flinch. She turned, grabbed a towel, and began wiping down a spill that wasn't even there. Just long enough to reset the scene. Pearson followed her again, leaning over the bar like he owned it. "Still ignoring me? That's cute. But you really should smile more. Might make you likable." Someone coughed from the corner, an older biker who'd seen enough nonsense in his day to know where this was going. But he stayed put. Maya had warned the regulars months ago. If anything ever goes down, don't get in the way. Just wait. Pearson's eyes darted to the towel in her hand. "You military too, Lisa. You got that whole disciplined, don't talk back vibe. You got a secret?" Maya let that hang in the air. 1 beat, 2. Then Pearson made the mistake. He reached across the bar again, fingers wrapping around her wrist. Not hard, not violent, just firm. The kind of touch that said, "I own this moment." Maya slowly turned to face him. Her voice, when it came, was calm. Too calm. "Let go of me." But Pearson didn't. He smiled wider, misreading the chill in her tone. "You going to make me?" The entire bar was quiet now. Poker chips frozen midair. Beers halfway to mouths. The jukebox's song faded into background static. And still, Maya didn't move. Then, she twisted her wrist slightly, not violently, just enough to break the grip. Pearson chuckled. "You're strong for a bartender." She stared at him. "I'm not a bartender," she said flatly. He blinked. "What?" Maya stepped out from behind the bar. No more towel, no more fake smile, just perfect posture, straight shoulders, and an energy shift that made every cell in the room sit up. "I serve drinks here," she said, walking toward him, "because it pays well and keeps me close to things most people overlook." Pearson took a half-step back. "You think I'm some girl who's going to let you act tough and loud because you've had too many drinks and think a rank gives you power?" His eyes narrowed. "You don't know who I am," he said, trying to regain footing. Maya smiled, but not kindly. "You're right," she said. "I don't know who you are." She stepped closer, just inches from his chest now. "But you also don't know who I am." Pearson was quiet. The room waited, and that's when her phone buzzed. She glanced at it. A message flashed. "Confirm asset position. Eyes on?" Pearson's eyes tracked the screen but couldn't process what he'd just seen. Before he could speak, she looked up again. "Enjoy your drink, Sergeant," she said. "It might be your last one served by someone who doesn't break bones for a living." And with that, she turned her back on him. Calm, controlled, deadly quiet. Pearson didn't laugh this time. He didn't say another word. He just stood there, suddenly unsure of everything. Pearson stood frozen, his drink untouched. For the first time that night, the arrogance drained from his face. Maya hadn't raised her voice, hadn't made a scene. That's what shook him the most. Her stillness, her control. It didn't match the picture in his head of how these things usually played out. He turned to glance at his fellow Marines, looking for some signal, some reassurance that he hadn't just lost his edge. But they weren't laughing anymore. One of them, Martinez, looked distinctly uncomfortable. Like he suddenly remembered a story he'd once heard about a female operative who took down a cartel cell with nothing but a broken chair leg and a shoelace. Urban legend, they said. Wasn't it? Pearson's voice cracked the silence. "You think you're some kind of spook?" He meant it as a jab, something to claw back control, but even he knew it sounded hollow. Maya didn't bother answering. She was already wiping down a glass, her eyes never leaving the countertop. But she did hear the door swing open. Two figures stepped inside, both dressed in civilian clothing, but their presence screamed military. Short haircuts, compact builds, eyes that scanned the room like heat-seeking lasers. One of them gave Maya the faintest nod. She didn't return it. Pearson followed their gaze. "Friends of yours?" Still no response. One of the newcomers walked straight toward Pearson. He held up a badge. No theatrics, no explanation. Just enough for Pearson's trained eyes to register the insignia. Not police, not FBI. Something else. "Sergeant," the man said calmly, "you're going to want to sit back down." Pearson stared at him. "I didn't do anything." The second man raised an eyebrow. "Didn't you?" Pearson looked back at Maya. Something about the way she was standing. Weight slightly shifted to her right leg, chin tilted just off-center, triggered an old memory. A seminar back at Quantico. Reading posture and hostile encounters. That stance wasn't casual. It was designed, efficient, lethal. "You're not just some off-duty reservist," he muttered. Maya finally looked up. Not with anger, not with smugness. Just truth. "I'm a specialist," she said quietly. "Black bag operations. Intercept, extract, eliminate. My records don't exist, and if they do, you'll never see them. I've worked under 4 administrations. Most of the world will never know what I've done, and that's exactly the way I like it." The entire bar was still. "You cornered me," she continued. "Tried to make me small. You thought this was your stage, but you forgot something important." Pearson swallowed. "I don't need a uniform," Maya said. "I am the warning." A few of the regulars exchanged glances. One of them raised his glass slightly, not to toast, but out of quiet respect. The two men who had entered earlier took positions at opposite ends of the bar. One tapped his earpiece, murmured something indecipherable. Pearson sat down. Not because he was told, but because, for the first time in years, he realized he wasn't the apex predator in the room. And he didn't know what scared him more, the truth of who Maya was, or the fact that she hadn't even gotten started yet. Pearson sat stiffly, spine straight, trying to reassert control over his body, if not the room. The two operatives flanking Maya had not moved an inch. No threats, no handcuffs, no weapons drawn. That made it worse. This wasn't a takedown. This was a reminder. Maya turned her back to the room and resumed bartending like nothing had happened. She poured drinks, cleaned glasses, made a joke to a regular. But every move was laced with power. She didn't need backup. The men weren't there to protect her. They were there to witness what came next, if she chose to let it. Pearson tried to speak. "I was just joking." Maya didn't look up, but the entire bar seemed to freeze again. Just a little fun? Now she turned. Not angry, but unflinching. "You don't get to decide what's harmless. You don't get to wear your uniform like armor in here and pretend the world belongs to you." Her voice was even. That's what made it dangerous. Pearson's lip curled. "So, what now? You gonna have me arrested for talking?" The two men shared a glance. One chuckled, just slightly. Maya walked around the bar, slow and deliberate. "Arrest you? No. That's the easy way out." Pearson stood, trying to puff himself back up. "Then what? You gonna lecture me?" "No," she said, stopping inches from him. "I'm going to teach you." That was when she pulled the small metal object from her back pocket. It wasn't a weapon. It was a coin. She flipped it between her fingers with practiced ease. Pearson caught the emblem before she clenched it in her fist again. Delta Force. Real. Official. Rare. "Ever heard of Operation Crosswind?" she asked. Pearson blinked. He had. Classified. Disastrous. Recovered only because someone had taken down 6 armed targets in under 2 minutes. Solo. "That was you." Maya didn't answer. She didn't need to. "You don't know how many like me are out there," she said. "Women who blend in, disappear, serve, bleed, while you drink and boast about deployments that ended with souvenir photos." Pearson stepped back, the weight of her words settling into his chest like a stone. A silence grew between them, dense and unrelenting. Then, unexpectedly, Maya smiled. It wasn't warm. It was merciful. "I'm not here to ruin you, Sergeant. You're doing that on your own. I'm just here to remind you, you're not the center of this story. You never were." She turned and walked back to the bar. The two operatives didn't follow. They stood still, their presence like shadows that only appeared when light hit truth. Pearson didn't speak again. He didn't finish his drink. He left. No door, slam. No parting insult. Just a man who had come face to face with something. Someone. He couldn't categorize, couldn't mock, couldn't dismiss. Behind the bar, Maya looked out the window, her reflection superimposed against the night. Not angry, not proud, just ready for the next man who needed reminding. Long before the coin, the missions, and the silence that followed her into rooms, Maya had simply been a girl no one expected much from. Born and raised in a forgotten town in Mississippi, Maya had been underestimated from the moment she learned to walk. Her school counselor once told her college might not be her path. A local sheriff chuckled when she said she wanted to join the military. Her own uncle had told her that combat was for men built for it. But it was her grandmother, a quiet woman with a spine of steel, who whispered something different. Let them think small. You think wide. So she did. Maya enlisted quietly after graduation. No fanfare, no goodbyes, Just a woman with her eyes forward and her past in the rearview mirror. Boot camp was the first time anyone called her too calm. The instructor said it like it was a weakness, but it was her strength. While others reacted, Maya calculated. When others shouted, she listened. She wasn't the strongest or the fastest, but she was the one who saw the ambush before it happened. The one who could stay still when the wind shifted. It didn't take long for someone to notice. She was flagged, pulled into a different room, a longer interview, more questions, and then, one day, handed a manila folder with no label and one instruction. You didn't see this. That was her beginning. What followed were years of silence. Black sites, disguises, not just infiltration, immersion. Maya could become anyone, go anywhere. The missions weren't about brute strength. They were about vanishing inside a world no one else could enter. And getting out alive, with everyone else's secrets in her hands. But all of that came at a price. She hadn't seen her family in 5 years. They thought she worked in government communications. Her mother left voicemails that began with hope and ended with pauses. Maya listened to every single one. Once, she watched her niece's birthday party over a hacked live stream from a safe house in Belgrade. The world called her elite. But at night, in those quiet moments after debriefs and before new identities, Maya was just a woman who hadn't hugged her sister in half a decade. That's why the bar wasn't just a disguise, it was her sanctuary. She'd chosen that town because it was quiet, unremarkable, a place where no one asked too many questions, where she could play pretend, not as an agent, but as herself, or at least the closest thing to it. She stocked the bar with her own books. She learned each regular's drink by memory. She made the jukebox play Coltrane after 10 p.m. every night. That peace, that fragile peace, was what Pearson had stepped into, and why she hadn't crushed him with the weight of her full resume. Because Maya wasn't looking for revenge. She was looking for one place in the world where she didn't have to be a weapon. 2 days after the incident, the bar door creaked open again. Same dull wind. Same quiet chime above the entrance. But this time, it wasn't Pearson. It was 2 men in uniform. Not dress blues, but the crisp, clean anonymity of military intelligence. Maya didn't flinch. She dried the glass in her hand with perfect rhythm. One of them approached the counter. He didn't order. "You're not in trouble," he said as if reading her stillness. "I never am," Maya replied calmly. He slid a folder toward her, thicker than usual. "Debrief's been concluded, no action needed. Witnesses confirmed your restraint." She arched a brow. "You came all this way to tell me that?" He tapped the folder. "There's a second offer inside." Maya didn't reach for it. Instead, she poured herself a drink. "I thought I already gave them enough," she said, sipping. "They want you back. Not in the field. Leadership. Training. Stateside." She finally picked up the folder, opened it, scanned it in seconds. "Sticky situations," she murmured. "Classified instructors. The man nodded. "We need people who've walked it, not just read the manual." Maya closed the folder, her fingers resting on it thoughtfully. She looked past the officer, through the dusty window at the quiet street outside. "You ever think," she said slowly, "that maybe some of us didn't survive all that to go back into it?" A long pause. Then the other man, who hadn't spoken yet, said, "You didn't survive it, ma'am. You defined it." And there it was. The part of her that had been dormant flickered. Not because of flattery, but because someone had seen her. Really seen her. But it wasn't time. Not yet. She slid the folder back. "If they're smart, they'll keep this open-ended." The men nodded. One of them, the younger, reached into his pocket, pulled out a coin. Not a challenge coin, but a worn, tarnished silver dollar. He slid it across the bar. "My father said, when you don't know what to do, flip a coin. Not for the answer, but for the moment it's in the air, because that's when your heart decides." Maya caught the coin mid-slide, held it in her hand. No toss. Not yet. The men left without another word. Maya placed the coin beside the register and turned back to the shelves. Another glass to dry. Another drink to pour. Outside, the wind kicked up dust. Inside, Coltrane hummed low. Later that night, a group of regulars returned. They asked about the fight, about the man. Maya smiled, wiped the counter, and said, "Sometimes people bring storms with them." They laughed, nodded, drank, and the coin sat there, untouched. But every now and then, Maya's fingers would brush it, not to flip it, just to know it was still there. Because one day, maybe she would toss it, and when it spun in the air, heart pounding, Maya would finally know if she was ready to stop pretending she was just a bartender and become the storm again.